Ambassador Ji-woo Kim stepped through the massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber, her black uniform bearing Earth's simple blue and white insignia. The journey from humanity's homeworld had taken 6 months through hyperspace, but she looked as composed as if she'd just walked across the street. The chamber itself was breathtaking. Crystalline spires stretched up into darkness, pulsing with alien energy. Floating platforms held representatives from 12 different species, each more intimidating than the last. The air hummed with translation devices working overtime to convert dozens of alien languages into something resembling communication. Ji-woo had studied each species for years. The Valkyrians looked like massive octopi crossed with jellyfish, their translucent tentacles constantly moving in patterns that conveyed emotion. The Karathi were built like living tanks, with thick armor plating covering their four-armed bodies, and faces marked by ritual scars from countless battles. The Zephyrians resembled walking crystal formations, their bodies chiming musical notes when they moved. So, rumbled the deep voice of Council Leader Thrakmor, his yellow eyes scanning Ji-woo like she was some curious insect. The humans finally arrive. We wondered when Earth would work up the courage to make their pathetic request. The Valkyrian representative, whose name roughly translated to flowing death, let his tentacles dance in amusement. Look at it, Thrakmor. Such a fragile little creature. Do they even have proper bones, or are they as soft inside as they appear outside? Murmurs of laughter rippled through the chamber. The insectoid hive queen clicked her mandibles in what passed for humor among her kind, while her thousands of eyes glittered with malice. Ji-woo had expected this reception. Earth's intelligence networks had warned her that humanity was seen as the galaxy's newest joke, a species that had barely mastered interstellar travel, trying to sit at the same table as civilizations that had conquered entire star clusters. Honored. Council, Ji-woo began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. I come representing the people of Earth, requesting membership in this great alliance. Alliance? The word came from Zarthek, leader of the machine-enhanced Cybrid collective. Half his face was metal, and his voice buzzed with electronic distortion. This is not an alliance, human. This is a hierarchy. The strong rule, the weak serve. Thrakmor leaned forward on his platform, his 4 massive arms crossed. Tell us, little human, what does your species offer? The Karathi bring the finest warriors in the galaxy. The Zephyrians possess technology that can reshape matter itself. The Valkyrians control trade routes across 17 sectors. What do humans bring besides primitive chemical rockets and amusing overconfidence? Ji-woo straightened her shoulders. We bring something perhaps more valuable than any weapon or technology. We bring the determination to protect those who cannot protect themselves. We bring innovation born from necessity. We bring the refusal to surrender, no matter how hopeless the odds appear. The chamber fell silent for a moment. Then the laughter began. It started with the hive queen's chittering, spreading to the Valkyrians' tentacle slapping, building into a crescendo as all 12 species joined in mocking humanity's representative. The sound echoed off the crystal walls like a symphony of contempt. Protection? Thrakmor's scarred face split into a grin that revealed rows of sharp teeth. Your entire military couldn't scratch the paint on one Karathi destroyer. We've seen your ships, human. Metal tubes with chemical engines, armed with explosive projectiles that wouldn't dent our shields. The Zephyrian hierarch chimed in, his crystal body resonating with harmonious mockery. Perhaps they could serve as court jesters. Their delusions of adequacy are quite entertaining. Or pets, suggested Flowing Death, his tentacles writhing with glee. I hear humans can be trained to perform simple tricks. Ji-woo felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her expression neutral. With respect, Council Leader, you judge us by appearances rather than substance. History has shown that underestimating humanity can be unwise. History. Thrakmor stood to his full imposing height, nearly 3 meters of scarred muscle and armor plating. Human, your species crawled down from trees while we were building star-spanning empires. Your history is a blink of an eye compared to ours. What could you possibly know of warfare or sacrifice that we have not mastered for millennia? The other representatives murmured agreement. Several pulled up holographic displays showing human military assets, small fleets of simple ships, basic. Energy weapons, outdated defensive systems. The mockery resumed with renewed vigor. Somewhere in the space between dimensions, invisible to all sensors in the chamber, the stealth ship Silent Thunder maintained its watch. Captain Hyun-Soo Park sat in his command chair, fingers gripping. The armrest so tightly his knuckles had gone white. Around him, his crew watched the proceedings with barely contained fury. "Sir," whispered Lieutenant So Young Lee, her voice tight with anger, "one word from you, and we could show them exactly what human weapons can do." Park's jaw worked silently as he watched the alien leaders humiliate his species' representative. The irony was almost unbearable. These arrogant creatures had no idea what they were mocking, no concept of what humanity had been preparing for while they built their comfortable empires. "Orders, sir?" Lee pressed quietly. Park forced himself to relax, though his eyes never left the display showing Ambassador Kim standing alone against the galaxy's most powerful beings. "We wait," he said finally. "Our time will come sooner than they think." Banfai. The council chamber, Thrackmore was delivering what he clearly considered the final word. "The vote is unanimous. Humanity is denied membership in the Galactic Council. Furthermore, human vessels are banned from core systems. Return to your little blue world, human, and perhaps in a few thousand years your species might evolve enough to deserve our attention." Jiwoo bowed slightly, her dignity intact despite the humiliation. "I understand your decision, Council Leader, but remember this moment. Remember it well." 3 months had passed since the humiliation at the Galactic Council, and the galaxy seemed to be holding its breath. Trade routes that had operated for centuries suddenly went quiet. Ships that ventured too far into the outer rim simply vanished without a trace. The first real warning came from Station Gamma 7, a remote monitoring post on the edge of known space. The duty officer, a young Zephyrian named Kethvar, was reviewing routine sensor data when his crystalline body began resonating with alarm frequencies. "Command, this is Gamma 7, he transmitted, his voice cracking with disbelief. "I'm reading massive gravitational disturbances in Sector 451. Space itself appears to be tearing apart." The response from Central Command was dismissive. "Gamma 7, check your sensors. Space doesn't tear." But Kethvar's instruments weren't malfunctioning. Through the station's viewports, he watched in horror as reality itself split open like a wound. The tear wasn't black. It was something worse than black, a color that hurt to look at and seemed to drain light from everything around it. Then the ships began emerging. They weren't like anything in the galactic databases. These vessels defied conventional design, their hulls appearing to be made of living shadow that rippled and flowed. They varied in size from small fighters to massive city-sized dreadnoughts, but they all shared the same nightmare quality. They seemed to absorb light, heat, and hope itself. "Command!" Kethvar screamed into his communicator. "Unknown vessels emerging from dimensional rift. They're eating the asteroids. The metal, the rock, everything just dissolves when they touch it." His transmission cut to static as the station was consumed by one of the smaller ships. Kethvar and his crew of 47 beings simply ceased to exist. Their atoms converted into raw energy to fuel the invaders' hunger. Within hours, entire star systems in the outer rim went dark. Not destroyed, consumed. Planets, moons, space, stations, even the stars themselves began to dim as the unknown vessels fed on everything they encountered. The Galactic Council's response was swift and predictable. They sent warnings to outer colonies and dispatched scout ships to investigate. Every scout that got close enough to transmit useful data sent back the same terrifying message. They're not just ships, they're alive, and they're hungry. Admiral Taijin-1, the Karathi's greatest military leader, received the emergency mobilization order while commanding the 4th Battle Fleet near the Karathi homeworld. A veteran of 17 major campaigns, he had never lost a battle. His reputation was built on crushing enemies with overwhelming force and tactical brilliance. 2,000 ships, he told his staff officers as they studied the deployment maps, the largest fleet ever assembled. Whatever these invaders are, they'll learn to fear Karathi steel. His flagship, the massive dreadnought Iron Fist, led the armada, toward the affected sectors. The Karathi fleet was truly impressive. Battleships bristling with plasma cannons, fighter squadrons that could darken space with their numbers, and shield generators powerful enough to deflect dying stars. The first engagement occurred near the ruins of what had been the Altair system. One's sensors detected hundreds of the shadow ships feeding on the remains of 3 planets. The Admiral's 4 eyes gleamed with anticipation as he gave the order. To attack, all ships weapons free. Show these invaders the price of challenging the Karathi Empire. The battle began exactly as one expected. His plasma cannons tore into the enemy vessels, explosions blooming across their dark hulls. Several of the smaller ships seemed to break apart under the bombardment. Victory appeared certain. Then the enemy adapted. The shadow ships began changing, their hulls shifting and flowing like liquid metal. The plasma that had damaged them moments before now passed harmlessly through their restructured armor. Worse, they began absorbing the energy from the Karathi weapons, growing larger and more powerful with each shot. Impossible, one muttered, watching his tactical display with growing horror. Switch to kinetic weapons. Hit them with solid ammunition. The Karathi fleet fired massive metal slugs, accelerated to near-light speed. For a moment, the projectiles seemed effective, punching. Holes through the enemy ships. But then the holes began to close, the ships healing themselves by consuming the very weapons that had damaged them. The counterattack was swift and merciless. Energy beams that seemed to unravel matter at the molecular level lanced out from the shadow ships. Karathi vessels didn't explode. They simply came apart, their atoms scattered across space like dust. One watched in disbelief as half his fleet disappeared in the first exchange. These weren't just advanced aliens. They were something fundamental different, something that treated the laws of physics as mere suggestions. All ships, fall back to formation Omega, he ordered, his voice steady despite the catastrophe unfolding around him. We need to regroup and... His words were cut off as something massive emerged from the dimensional rift. A ship, if it could be called that, easily 10 times larger than Wan's flagship. It was less a vessel than a living nightmare, its hull crawling with what looked like metallic parasites that constantly consumed and rebuilt its surface. The massive entity didn't fire weapons. Instead, it simply extended tendrils of living darkness that reached out across impossible distances to wrap around Karathi ships. The proud vessels of the 4th Battle Fleet were drawn inexorably toward the creature's hull, where they disappeared into what could only be described as mouths. Admiral Wan managed one final transmission as his own ship was caught by the tendrils. "Command, this is Admiral Wan. They're not ships, they're something else entirely. They adapt to everything we..." The signal cut to static as the Iron Fist was consumed, taking with it the greatest military mind the Karathi had ever produced. News of the fleet's destruction reached the Galactic Council within hours. The proud Karathi Empire, which had boasted for millennia that their military was unstoppable, had lost 2,000 ships without destroying a single enemy vessel. Panic spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The crystal cities of Zephyr Prime began activating ancient defensive protocols that hadn't been used in 10,000 years. The Hive Queen worlds recalled their exploration fleets and started constructing massive planetary shields. Even the arrogant Valkyrian merchants began hoarding resources and fleeing toward the galactic core. But it wasn't enough. The invaders, the devourers, as the ancient records called them, swept through space like a plague of living shadow. They consumed everything, ships, stations, planets, entire star systems. What they couldn't eat, they corrupted, turning peaceful worlds into twisted reflections of their own nightmare realm. The Zephyrian crystal cities, marvels of technology that had stood for millions of years, cracked under energies that violated the fundamental laws of reality. The Hive Queen worlds went dark as their collective consciousness was torn apart by parasitic thoughts that burrowed into their shared mind. Within days, 3 major civilizations had fallen. The remainder of the Galactic Council watched in terror as the Devourers consumed everything in their path, growing stronger with each victory. It was then that Council leader Thrakmor, his pride shattered and his empire in ruins, made the call that 3 months earlier would have been unthinkable. Standing in the emergency bunker beneath the council chambers, surrounded by the panicked representatives of the surviving species, he activated the galaxy-wide emergency broadcast. His hands shook as he spoke into the transmitter. To all civilizations, including Earth, I am Council Leader Thrakmor. The Devourers have returned. Ancient records speak of them consuming entire galaxies before entering dormancy eons ago. Our fleets are broken. Our worlds are falling. We need every ship, every weapon, every warrior willing to stand against the darkness. Please. His voice cracked with desperation that would have been impossible to imagine just days before. The proud leader who had mocked humanity's offer of protection was now begging for help from the very species he had dismissed as primitive. Aboard the human colony vessel, New Dawn, Ambassador Ji-Woo Kim received the transmission in her private quarters. She had been expecting this call, though she had hoped it would never come. Around her, the bridge crew had gathered, Captain Dong-Wook Han, Lieutenant Commander Soo-Min Park, and a dozen other officers who had served with distinction in humanities. Hidden Fleet. Their faces were grim, but none of them looked surprised. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. "Ma'am," Captain Han said quietly, "our deep space sensors confirm the reports. 3 civilizations down, and the Devourers are moving toward the core systems. They'll reach the major population centers within weeks." Ji-Woo nodded slowly, her fingers absently tracing the edge of a small device on her desk, a quantum communicator linked to frequency that officially didn't exist. "It's time," she said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of 3 centuries of preparation. "Send the activation signal. All human vessels are to begin immediate deployment to their assigned positions." Captain Han's finger hovered over the transmit button. "Ma'am, once we do this, there's no going back. The galaxy will know what we've been hiding." Ji-Woo looked out through the viewport at the stars, where somewhere in the darkness, an ancient evil was consuming everything in its path. In a few hours, those same stars would witness humanity's true face revealed to the galaxy. "Send the signal, Captain. It's time to show them what humans are really capable of." The holographic image of Hierarch Veltar flickered weakly in the communication chamber aboard the New Dawn. The once proud Zephyrian leader's crystalline form was cracked and dim, his voice barely a whisper through the static. "You knew this would happen," he accused, his dying words carrying the weight of a civilization's final breath. "Your people, they weren't surprised when the Devourers came." "How?" Ji-Woo Kim stood before the failing transmission, her hands clasped behind her back. Around her, the bridge crew of the New Dawn watched in silence as one of the galaxy's oldest races faced extinction. She had dreaded this conversation for years, but the time for secrets had passed. "Our ancestors left us warnings," she said simply. "Cave paintings in France that showed dark ships consuming the stars, stone tablets in Egypt describing the Eaters of Light, ancient texts in Tibet speaking of the Void Walkers who would return when the galaxy grew fat and complacent." The Hierarch's form shuddered. "Impossible. Your species is barely 50,000 years old. The last Devourer awakening was over 2 million years ago." "The survivors weren't all destroyed," Ji-Woo explained, her voice gentle despite the terrible truth she was revealing. "Some escaped to primitive worlds on the galaxy's edge. Earth was one of them. They died there, but not before leaving us breadcrumbs to follow. Everything humanity has built, every advancement we've made, has been guided by those fragments of ancient knowledge." The truth was staggering even to speak aloud. Humanity's rapid technological advancement, their seemingly intuitive understanding of dimensional physics, their mysterious ability to develop weapons that defied conventional science, none of it had been natural evolution. While other species had built comfortable empires and grown soft with success, humanity had been preparing for war. Every human child learned about the Great Darkness in school, though most believed it was mythology. The brightest minds of each generation were quietly recruited into secret programs that had been running for centuries. The wheel wasn't humanity's greatest invention, Ji-Woo continued. It was the dimensional fold drive. We've had the theoretical framework for 300 years. We just needed time to build the ships. Hierarch Veltar's image began to break apart as Zephyr Prime's final communication relays failed. Then why didn't you warn us? Why did you let us mock you when you could have? Because you wouldn't have listened, Jiwoo said softly. Would the Galactic Council have believed that primitive humans possessed technology beyond their understanding? Would they have accepted that Earth's crude chemical rockets were just a cover story? The hologram flickered one last time before dying completely. The Zephyrian civilization, masters of crystal technology for 2 million years, had joined their ancestors in extinction. Captain Dong-wook Han approached Jiwoo, his expression grim. "Ma'am, we're receiving confirmation signals from all sectors. The 7th Fleet is in position and ready for dimensional emergence." Jiwoo activated her personal communicator, the device humming with quantum frequencies that shouldn't have been possible with known technology. "Captain Park, this is Ambassador Kim. You are authorized to begin Operation Shadowbreak." The response came immediately, Captain Hyunsoo Park's voice crackling through dimensional static. "Silent Thunder reporting. All systems green. The 7th Fleet is ready for emergence. We've been watching the Devourer's advance patterns. They're adapting to conventional physics, but they haven't encountered 7th dimensional warfare yet. Throughout the galaxy, space itself began to shimmer. In the Karathi home system, where Devourer ships were feeding on the remains of 3 worlds, reality twisted as something massive began to phase into normal space. The shadow ships paused their feeding, their sensor arrays struggling to comprehend what they were detecting. The Silent Thunder emerged first, its hull a masterpiece of human engineering that combined quantum armor with dimensional displacement technology. The ship was sleek where alien vessels were bulky, elegant where they were crude. Its hull gleamed with an inner light that seemed to bend space around it. But it wasn't alone. One by one, massive human warships materialized from the 7th dimension, the Quantum Storm, a dreadnought armed with zero-point cannons that could unravel matter at the subatomic level. The Dimensional Blade, a carrier that launched fighters capable of attacking from multiple dimensions simultaneously. The Reality's Edge, a destroyer that could phase through enemy shields as if they didn't exist. In total, 300 ships emerged across 17 star systems, each one representing centuries of secret development and hidden construction. The human fleet wasn't just advanced, it was impossible by the standards of known science. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the Silent Thunder, surrounded by officers who had trained their entire lives for this moment. Lieutenant So-Young Lee manned the dimensional warfare station, her fingers dancing over controls that would have baffled the galaxy's greatest scientists. Commander Min-Ho Choi oversaw the quantum weapon systems, each one capable of rewriting the laws of physics in localized space. "Sir," reported Lieutenant Jung-Woo Kim from the sensor station, "the Devourers are trying to adapt to our dimensional signatures. They're shifting their hulls to match our frequency." Park smiled grimly. This was exactly what they had expected. "Let them try. Helm, take us into full 7th dimensional combat mode. Show them what happens when you mess with humanity's children." The Silent Thunder didn't just move through space. It folded space around itself, appearing and disappearing like a ghost made of starlight. The Devourer ships, which had easily consumed the galaxy's mightiest fleets, found themselves facing an enemy that refused to play by the rules they understood. Human weapons struck from angles that shouldn't have existed. The zero-point cannons fired bursts of pure annihilation that could delete matter from reality. The dimensional torpedoes phased through Devourer hulls and exploded inside their vital systems. The quantum disruptors scrambled the alien ship's ability to adapt, trapping them in configurations that made them vulnerable. For the first time since their awakening, the Devourers began to take damage. "Target their neural cores," Park commanded. "Hit them from the 7th dimension where they can't defend." The Silent Thunder folded reality around itself, appearing inside a massive Devourer mothership. The surprise attack devastated the creature's central processing unit before it could adapt to the intrusion. The dying alien vessel's screams echoed across dimensional frequencies as it collapsed in on itself. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as humanity's hidden fleet engaged the invaders. The Devourers, which had consumed entire civilizations, without effort, found themselves facing an enemy that had spent 3 centuries preparing specifically for this war. The secret was out now. The galaxy's primitive humans possessed technology that made the Galactic Council's greatest achievements look like stone tools. But more than that, they possessed something the Devourers had never encountered in their eons of feeding. A species that had evolved specifically to fight them. "All ships," Captain Park announced over the fleet communications, his voice carrying to every human vessel across 17 star systems. "Engage 7th dimensional combat protocols. It's time to show these ancient nightmares what 3 centuries of human ingenuity looks like. For Earth, for our ancestors who died to leave us warnings, and for every innocent life these monsters have consumed." The real war was just beginning, and for the first time since the Devourers had awakened, they faced an enemy that had been specifically designed to destroy them. The galaxy was about to learn what happened when you underestimated humanity's determination to protect the innocent. In the depths of space, ancient evil met human innovation, and the stars themselves held their breath to see which would prove stronger. The Devourers had consumed 1,000 galaxies across millions of years, but they had never encountered anything like humanity's dimensional warfare. Captain Park watched through the Silent Thunder's viewscreen as his ship materialized inside a Devourer cruiser, bypassing its shields entirely. The alien vessel's interior was a nightmare of living machinery. Walls that pulsed like organs, conduits that bled black ichor, and neural networks that screamed in frequencies that could drive lesser beings insane. "Fire 0-point charges directly into their core structure," Park commanded, his voice steady despite the horror surrounding them. The weapons fired, and reality itself seemed to scream. The 0-point cannons didn't just destroy matter, they erased it from existence, leaving perfect spherical voids where the Devourer's vital systems had been. The alien ship convulsed like a dying animal before imploding into nothingness. "Dimensional jump complete," reported Lieutenant Jungwoo Kim. "We're clear of the debris field." The Silent Thunder phased back into normal space, where the rest of the 7th Fleet was engaging the enemy across 17 different sectors. The battle was unlike anything in recorded history. Human ships would vanish from one location and instantly appear behind enemy vessels, striking from impossible angles before disappearing again. Commander Min-Ho Choi studied his tactical display, watching as red dots representing Devourer ships blinked out one by one. "Their adaptation protocols can't keep up with our dimensional shifts. Every time they modify their hulls to defend against one attack vector, we hit them from a completely different dimension." But the enemy was learning. The larger Devourer vessels began splitting into smaller units, trying to surround areas where human ships might emerge. Their black hulls started growing new appendages, sensor arrays designed to detect dimensional disturbances. "Sir," Lieutenant So Young Lee called from her station, "I'm reading massive energy buildup from the Devourer command ship. They're trying to create some kind of dimensional anchor field." Park frowned at the readings. If the Devourers could lock human ships into normal space, they would lose their primary advantage. "All ships, this is Silent Thunder. Enemy is attempting to disrupt our dimensional capabilities. Accelerate attack patterns." The response was immediate. Across the battlefield, human vessels began moving faster, striking harder. The Quantum Storm unleashed a devastating barrage of antimatter torpedoes that tore through 3 Devourer destroyers in seconds. The Reality's Edge phased through the hull of an enemy battleship, firing quantum disruptors directly into its neural core. But the Devourers were adapting faster than expected. Their largest vessels began generating fields that caused space itself to become unstable. Human ships trying to phase through these areas found themselves trapped between dimensions, easy targets for the enemy's energy weapons. Captain Dong Hyun, Nam's ship Starbreaker, was caught in one such trap while protecting a convoy of Zephyrian refugees. The proud destroyer found itself locked in normal space, surrounded by 6 Devourer cruisers that moved in for the kill. "This is Captain Nam to all vessels," his voice crackled over the communications array. "My ship is disabled. We cannot reach dimensional phase. I'm ordering all nearby human vessels to continue the mission." "Negative, Starbreaker," Park responded immediately. We're coming to assist. Sir, with respect, you cannot risk the fleet for one ship. These refugees represent the last survivors of an entire civilization. They must reach safety. The Starbreaker turned toward the approaching Devourer vessels, its engines glowing white-hot as Nam pushed them beyond safe limits. The ship's hull began to crack under the strain, but its weapons kept firing. "Tell my family on Earth that I died protecting innocents," Nam transmitted as his ship rammed into the lead Devourer cruiser. The resulting explosion consumed both vessels and cleared a path for the refugee convoy to escape. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy. Commander Su Jin Yoon led the destroyer Iron Will in a desperate assault against a Devourer world killer, a massive vessel designed to consume entire planets. Her ship was outgunned and outnumbered, but Yoon refused to retreat, while millions of innocent lives hung in the balance. "All power to weapons," she ordered, as enemy fire tore through her ship's hull. "We stop this thing here or it reaches the civilian colonies." The Iron Will dove directly into the world killer's massive maw, firing zero-point charges as it went. Yoon's crew fought to the last breath, their sacrifice preventing the annihilation of 3 billion beings on the nearby worlds. The turning point came when Lieutenant So Young Lee made a crucial discovery. While analyzing the wreckage of destroyed Devourer vessels, she noticed something that changed everything. "Captain," she called excitedly from her sensor station, "I've found their weakness. The Devourers exist primarily in normal space-time. They can adapt to different energy frequencies and even some dimensional effects, but they can't actually exist in the 7th dimension. When we phase into their ships, we're not just bypassing their defenses, we're attacking them from a realm they can't enter." Park leaned over her station, studying the data. "You're saying they're essentially 3-dimensional beings trying to fight a 4-dimensional war?" "Exactly. They can detect us when we're in the 7th dimension, and they can try to disrupt our phase capabilities, but they can't follow us there. If we could somehow trap them between dimensions..." The implications hit Park immediately. He activated the fleet-wide communication system, his voice reaching every human ship across the galaxy. "All vessels, this is Captain Park. Report to Dimensional Coordinate 7.3.9 for emergency tactical briefing. I believe we've found a way to end this war." Within hours, the holographic forms of every surviving human fleet commander gathered in the Silent Thunder's briefing room. Captain Mi Young Seo of the Void Hunter, Commander Tai Ho Yang from the Dimensional Spear, Captain Yunji Kwon of the Reality Storm, 37 officers who had spent their lives preparing for this moment. "The plan is simple in concept, terrifying in execution," Park explained, gesturing to the tactical display. "We can't destroy all the Devourers individually. There are too many, and they're adapting to our attacks, but we can trap them in a dimensional collapse. If we can lure their entire fleet to one location and then destabilize the space-time barrier between normal space and the 7th dimension," Captain Seo finished the thought. "The resulting implosion would drag everything in the area into dimensional void, including us." "The Silent Thunder and her crew are prepared to make that sacrifice," Park said quietly. "We'll serve as bait to draw the Devourers into the trap. The rest of you will create the dimensional collapse from a safe distance." The room fell silent. Every officer present understood what Park was proposing, a suicide mission that would end the war, but cost him and his crew their lives. Commander Yang stood slowly. "Sir, the Dimensional Spear volunteers to join the Silent Thunder. This shouldn't fall on one ship alone." One by one, every officer in the room stood. Captain Kwon spoke for all of them. "We didn't come this far to let you face the darkness." "Alone, sir. Where the Silent Thunder goes, the 7th Fleet follows." Park looked around the room at the faces of humanity's finest officers, men and women who had trained their entire lives for this war, who had watched their comrades die, protecting strangers, who now volunteered to sacrifice everything for a galaxy that had mocked them just months before. "Then we do this together," he said finally. "Send word to Earth. Tell them that humanity kept its promise. We protected the innocent, even unto death." The final battle was about to begin, and humanity would prove once and for all that some things were worth any sacrifice. The dimensional rift hung in space like a wound that refused to heal, spewing out endless streams of Devourer vessels. It was here, at the source of the invasion, that humanity would make its final stand. Captain Park stood on the bridge of the Silent Thunder, watching as the largest Devourer fleet ever assembled poured through the tear in reality. Thousands of black ships, each one capable of consuming entire worlds, formed defensive formations around their lifeline to the void between galaxies. All human vessels, this is Silent Thunder, Park announced over the fleet communications. Today we end this war, not with victory parades or medal ceremonies, but with sacrifice. The galaxy will remember what we did here. The human fleet formed up behind him, 237 ships representing humanity's greatest technological achievement. Each vessel was crewed by volunteers who understood they were flying toward certain death. Commander Tai Ho Yang's voice crackled through the comm from the dimensional spear. "Sir, our scientists confirm the plan will work. If we can destabilize the rift from inside the seventh dimension, the resulting cascade will collapse the portal and trap the entire Devourer fleet in dimensional void. And us with them," added Captain Mi Young Seo from the Void Hunter. "There's no way to trigger the collapse and escape the blast radius." Park nodded grimly. They had run the calculations dozens of times. The energy required to collapse a dimensional rift of this size would create a cascade effect that would consume everything within 3 light years. The human fleet would need to be at the epicenter to ensure the Devourers couldn't escape. "Helm, set course for the rift. All ships, prepare for final approach." The Silent Thunder led the charge, phasing in and out of normal space as Devourer vessels tried desperately to intercept them. The enemy had learned to predict human dimensional movements, but they couldn't match the speed and precision of ships designed specifically for this type of warfare. Lieutenant Jung-Woo Kim called out from his station, "Sir, massive energy build-up from the Devourer command ships. They're trying to seal the rift behind them." "They know what we're planning," Park realized. "All ships, emergency acceleration. We have to reach the rift before they can close it." The battle that followed was the most intense of the war. Human ships dove through swarms of Devourer fighters, their quantum weapons carving paths through enemy formations. The reality storm took heavy damage protecting the fleet's left flank, Captain Yoonji Kwon refusing to abandon her position even as her ship's hull began to crack. Silent Thunder. This is reality storm. We're losing containment in the dimensional. Drive. I'm going to ram their command ship to clear your path. Negative and reality storm. We can find another way. Sir, with respect, there is no other way. Tell my daughter on Earth that her mother died a hero. Captain Kwan's ship accelerated to maximum speed, its failing engines leaving a trail of quantum fire as it plowed directly into the largest Devourer vessel. The explosion cleared a corridor straight to the dimensional rift. "We need to collapse the rift from inside," Park announced to his crew as they approached the swirling chaos of the dimensional tear. "Once we phase into the 7th dimension at the rift's core, the quantum cascade will begin. There's no coming back from this." The bridge fell silent. These men and women had served together for years, training for a war they hoped would never come. Now they faced the ultimate test of their dedication. Lieutenant So Young Lee was the first to speak. "We knew the risks when we volunteered for dimensional warfare, sir. Every one of us signed up knowing this day might come." One by one, the crew nodded their agreement. Navigation Officer Min Jung Park straightened her uniform. "My grandfather fought in the Korean War. He always said some battles are worth dying for." Weapons Officer Hyun Woo Choi managed a grim smile. "Besides, sir, someone has to show these ancient nightmares that humans don't back down from a fight." Engineer Sir Min Lee added quietly, "Our families will understand. We're not just fighting for Earth, we're fighting for every innocent life in the galaxy." Park felt a surge of pride in his crew. These were ordinary people who had chosen to do extraordinary things. "Then we go together. All hands prepare for dimensional phase into the rift core." The Silent Thunder accelerated toward the dimensional rift, its hull beginning to glow as it approached the tear in space-time. Reality itself seemed to scream as the ship pushed deeper into the chaos between dimensions. Behind them, the remaining human fleet followed, ships with names like Starbound Defiance, Quantum Valor, and Dimensional Guardian. Each vessel carried crews who had made the same choice, to sacrifice everything for a galaxy that had once mocked them. "Dimensional phase in progress," reported Lee from her station. "We're entering the 7th dimension. Reality distortion increasing exponentially." Through the view screen, Park watched as the universe twisted around them. Stars became lines of light, space folded in on itself, and the normal laws of physics became mere suggestions. At the center of it all lay the source of the dimensional rift, a massive tear in the fabric of reality itself. There, Park pointed to the swirling vortex ahead. The quantum cascade must be triggered at the exact center of the rift. One mistake, and the Devourers escape to terrorize another galaxy. The Omai ship shuddered as gravitational forces that shouldn't exist tried to tear it apart. Warning lights flashed across every station as the hull stress reached critical levels. "Hull integrity at 30% and falling," reported the engineering section. "We're not going to hold together much longer." "We don't need much longer," Park replied. His hands steady on the controls despite the chaos around them, he began the activation sequence for the quantum cascade device, a weapon that would rewrite the laws of physics in localized space. "Sir," Lieutenant Lee said softly, "I'm reading. Massive Devourer reinforcements coming through the rift. If we don't trigger the cascade in the next 30 seconds, they'll have enough ships to overwhelm the galaxy even without this portal." Park's finger hovered over the final activation control. Around him, his crew worked with calm efficiency, each person focused on their duties even as reality collapsed around them. "For Earth," he whispered, thinking of the blue world that had given birth to their species. "For all life in the galaxy." He pressed the control. The explosion that followed was visible across 17 star systems. The dimensional rift didn't just close, it imploded, taking with it the entire Devourer fleet and every human ship that had made the ultimate sacrifice. When the light faded, nothing remained but empty space and the memory of heroes. 6 months. Later, Ambassador Ji-Woo Kim stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chambers. The crystalline spires had been reconstructed, but the arrogance that had once filled these halls was gone forever. The surviving representatives of 12 species looked up at her with expressions of deep respect and gratitude. Council leader Thrakmor approached her slowly. The proud Karathi warrior was missing 2 arms, lost in the desperate battles against the Devourers. His voice, once filled with mockery, now carried only reverence. "Ambassador Kim," he said formally, "humanity has proven itself beyond all doubt. Your people sacrificed everything to save civilizations that had mocked them. We formally request Earth's leadership in rebuilding our shattered galaxy." Ji-Woo looked out through the great windows at the stars, where Captain Park and his brave crew had made their final stand. Somewhere out there, the Silent Thunder and 200 other human ships had chosen death over defeat, sacrifice over survival. "We accept," she said quietly, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. "Not to rule over you, but to serve alongside you, to ensure that the darkness never returns, and that the sacrifice of our heroes was not in vain." The Zephyrian hierarch, his crystal form dim with grief for his fallen people, spoke with trembling harmonics. "How do we repay such a debt? How do we honor those who died for strangers?" "By remembering," Ji-Woo replied simply, "by building a galaxy where species judge each other not by appearance or prejudice, but by actions and character, by ensuring that never again will innocent civilizations face extinction alone." The galaxy had learned the hardest lesson of all, that sometimes the greatest strength comes from those others underestimate. Humanity hadn't sought conquest or domination. They had chosen sacrifice, and in doing so they had earned something far more valuable than fear or submission. They had earned respect, love, and the eternal gratitude of countless billions of beings who would live because humans had been willing to die. The age of human leadership had begun, built not on the foundation of military might, but on the bedrock of selfless sacrifice. Captain Park and his crew would never see the peaceful galaxy they had died to create, but their legacy would endure as long as stars burned in the void. In the end, they had proven that humanity's greatest weapon was not their technology or their ships, but their unwavering commitment to protect the innocent no matter the cost. The end.